now we are reaching these completely untenable situations, right? And so if we want to have like any say, it has to start now. Most amazing thing is that you will still be the face of that lawsuit when it comes down when something bad happens. Unlike other industries where efficiency is the prize, efficiency should not be the prize in medicine, right? And you're right. As long as it's your name and your license and your patient, that still has to be at the forefront. And the external pressures are hard. And of course, that's why people are leaving medicine, right? Because it sucks. It's hard.
So you've interviewed many physicians who have gone through this or lawsuits. Are there any common themes or lessons that tend to emerge from those experiences?
Yes. So I think that sort of what we've talked about in terms of the emotional distress and the not having an understanding in the process, and sort of having, sort of loss of innocence as you go through this whole thing, as it kind of dawns on you X, Y, and Z. Um, One really important theme that we have to look at is the theme of victimhood, right? That we're somehow victims in this. Of course, the plaintiff also feels like they're victim to whatever happened. Now, the plaintiff, a lot of them never got the story like from you about what happened. A lot of them had something bad. They went to an attorney finds an expert, and they all come back and say, yeah, that doctor is terrible. That doctor is negligent. This wouldn't have happened to you if they weren't so negligent, if they did, right? Like nothing stokes the anger of the plaintiff like that. A lot of times, the first time they get to hear your side of the story is like 8 years later in court, right? And then sometimes they're very surprised, right? So, um, the themes that come up are, there's us feeling like victims. We feel powerless. We feel helpless. We have sometimes anger. We're mad at the whoever it is that left us the system that works like this. We're mad at our attendings for never teaching us about anything. We're just mad. We feel about, unfair. We feel like this whole thing is unfair. Or again, the pain of when you feel like this was your fault. I do often see a theme of people taking on more responsibility than is theirs to own. For example, I'll change a little bit of it, but I had a case once where an OBGYN recognized in a patient who ought not to have had one, a uterine perforation. She got that one right to the OR. She saved the mother's life. She saved the baby's life. The baby had some deficits afterwards and now was getting sued. And so, her viewpoint was, I feel terribly that I made this happen. Like, how'd you make this happen? Like, this was not a predictable event, right? This was not a patient who you would have expected in any way to have a uterine perforation. Like, how is this your fault? I don't know. I should have done this. I should have done that. I could have done this. I could have done that. No, like, no, you didn't make this happen, right? But our grief and our desire to, we feel so much responsibility. So that's a theme too, is over owning what was truly our responsibility. I mean, the litigation system will make you feel like everything that ever happened is your fault. I was on a podcast recently, and the surgeon was talking about a case that she knew about of her friends who it was another OB case. The baby had a shoulder dystocia, and they safely delivered her. And but then at the age of 13, she found she couldn't hook her bra, and blamed that on the shoulder dystocia. Could it be that happened at birth? And yeah, the plaintiff attorney took that case, right? And so for OB cases, you have up to the age of 18. So this could eat you alive, right? These feelings of bitterness, of helplessness, of victimhood. Um, then in physicians who really do well, if there's one episode of the podcast that I will plug, I mean, season 1 is your basic like instructional, but in season 3, there's an episode called The Educated Defendant. And that is one that I feel like I would like everybody to listen to, because it tells the story of a radiologist who sort of went through and started having these things realized to him, like occur to him, like, oh, like this is not about me. He did everything right. And yet, like, why aren't they letting me out? Why aren't they letting me out? Why am I still in this thing? And then he realizes some things and realizes, wow, I'm not getting out of this thing. So now what? Right. And this is where a lot of us stop. We just stop. This is where we just, accept the overwhelm and the helplessness and the victimhood. And then this is what eats us up alive. And he did something pivotal, which is what I eventually did in my own life, which was decide like, all right, well, you know what? I got to learn how to play this game, man. and he got himself an education, and he talks about how he did that, and then we talk about what happened at trial thereafter, and the win that was his in the end. We have to change our narrative around this so that the themes become a little bit more empowering as time goes by, and I think that's possible for a lot of us. But I 100% think that's necessary.
You touched a little bit upon documentation in malpractice cases. Are there any other practical steps you think physicians can take early in their careers to reduce their legal risk while still practicing good medicine?
Yeah, quite a number, in fact. I mean, a lot of these are, and I don't like the term risk management because it implies that like you can actually manage your risk. You can't. I mean, you can reduce your risk, you can mitigate your risk, but you can't completely manage risk in medicine. It just can't be done, right? So I never want to talk about this with the implication that if you are sued anyway, that somehow you didn't do one of these things. And is a huge problem with me with risk management is because they're like good communication prevents lawsuits, which it may, also may not, right? So you can really do everything right and then wind up in a lawsuit. So I'll say these things, but I wanted to say it with that caveat. But yeah, communication is very, very helpful, right? And so really taking time with your patients. This is a problem, right? You should take time with your patients, right? I know the world says that you should not, right? And this is also us falling asleep at the wheel in terms of the business of medicine, right? But overarchingly, we have masters that say, like, you're not going to earn a living unless you see everybody in 10 minutes. And you know what? I'm sorry. No. Like some people you can see in 10 minutes when you're like, this is totally rote. And yes, those people still, you should make that effort to make them feel cared for and heard and everything. But once in a while, you're going to run into something that you know needs some time. You take that time with that patient, right? Communicate with them. After an adverse event, communication is key, right? Learn how to do a proper disclosure conversation. Work with risk is always happy to get people resources about how to have those conversations. They're going to want to hear things from the doctor. And they are delicate conversations that patients deserve to hear, that we also deserve to learn how to do effectively for the humanity of everybody involved, right? So communication before, during, after, informed consent issues come up all the time. So being very, very careful to truly make sure that patient has informed consent. Um, Putting systems in place so that things don't fall through the cracks, that all the busy work, all the lab stuff, all the stuff that's coming back, like making sure your system, that everybody in an office understands the importance of these systems, because increasingly as these systems are, like you don't see stuff unless somebody flags it or sends it to the right file or whatever, but you can't miss that stuff, right? So our systems are gonna, they're really going to save us sometimes. I know there's a lot of noise in it, but really sort of seeing if you can refine and develop your systems so that you're as informed as you need to be. And then with the documentation, you don't have to write everything under the sun, but if you're going to document something that, like, instead of listing like these are all the things it could be, if you're going to list something that's serious and you're not doing something to follow up on it, like you at least have to put in there why you don't think it's that thing. Right. So some people think if I magically list like all the diagnoses that this could be, and then I stop, like that's going to save me somehow. Like, no, like your medical decision making really ought to be like a thoughtful, like I did consider these things. This is why I don't think that, but it doesn't have to be long, but, note bloat is stupid, right? That your note really just needs to be a thoughtful, like, here's my exam. This is what the history was. Don't copy paste a million times. Write your own little note. Let it show that you were thoughtful, and always document like you care. Hopefully you do care, right? But your note, someone should be able to read your note and get the feeling that you cared about this person, that you liked this person, that you are advocating for this person, right? So your tone always should be that you're on the side of the patient, that you're the patient's advocate. Like that's how you chart from that mindset. It's helpful if you feel from that mindset. That makes the charting easier. But that holds a lot of weight later. It really does.
It's very difficult because in this current healthcare system, how do you ask for more time when you're not given that time? I mean,
Oh, I
when you
just take
have
my time. I mean, I know, like, this is the thing is like if you're your own boss or whatever, yeah, we are the doctors. Okay. The system doesn't run without us. It just doesn't. And maybe this is because I'm in my zero F's era after like 30 years of doing this, but like we are, the system depends on us, right? And so I know there's bean counters. I know we're all employees now. And some of it is like, maybe how do you take that back? How do you take ownership of your own license, ownership of your own practice. How do you take that back? Right. Like there's a lot of discussions about that. But also like metrics aren't my mama. Like they can say like you're not getting your bonus or whatever. And then maybe I'll decide this is stupid and I'm going to go work somewhere else. Or I'm going to take, but my number one, like my number one obligation is to my patient and myself, right? I want to practice medicine the way I know I should be practicing medicine. I want to take care of the patient the way I want to take care of the patient. And everybody else, honestly, like we all have to push back against this collectively. And you vote with your own feet. We can't, I know it takes a long time to be licensed somewhere else or to get a different job. The non-compete clauses have got to go. We've got to fight it. I mean, they're supposed to be gone, but yet they're still in there. We need to collectively pick our heads up from our, you know, computers for long enough to actually start advocating for ourselves. Like we have completely lost the plot. And so getting some of that control back is going to be really, really critical because this is not just a doctor problem. This is a doctor and patient problem. This is a healthcare access problem. This is everybody's care is suffering because money has become the primary motivator. And I know we've got to stay afloat. And yeah, the government needs to hear this. Medicare funding needs to change. Like, but it has to start somewhere, right? And so where it starts with me is that when I feel like I need to actually take an extra 10 minutes because something's not adding up or because I need to document something very thoughtfully, I take it. And if they're going to fire me over that, like, okay, like I'll find another job. It's just, I can't let that run my life. I can only serve two masters, and that's the patient and me. And then I have to strategize around the rest of it. And I think that's something that we can learn how to do.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, in our field, there are employers that basically pay you hourly, for example, and then there's no cap for how many patients there are for you to see, and then ultimately your name is the responsible for all these patients.
Of
So
course.
what happens is that at the end of the day, if you're not addressing all these patients or you're not spending the time that is needed for each patient, then you just have to put in your personal time. There's no other option, and that's the problem, I think. And then we interviewed many physicians that they feel stuck. The problem is a lot of employers are turning to be like this. It's not like I'm going to go to this employer and it's going to be better. They might be better, but unfortunately, it's, as you said, we have to have a collective voice fighting this. That's why Santoshi and I decided to do this podcast, because we hear a lot of physicians getting retaliated against when they bring up the issues of patient safety and patient care. A lot of physicians that feel stuck in their roles, and they have tried other roles. They go to another role and it's the same. Another employer, it's
Yeah.
the same. And then ultimately deciding that maybe the independent contractor route is better for us to voice our opinions. And then if they don't like it, they don't like it.
And they don't like it. I mean, this has to be like a cultural change, right? And there has to be some collective, and now our doctors aren't, typically allowed to unionize, but I mean, there has to be some sort of collective bargaining that comes into it where we're all talking out loud about the fact that these are issues and pushing it back, and honestly, taking it to the press, honestly, taking it to the government, taking it to like wherever it is. We have to start advocating. And we're advocating for patients, right? Like, because they can say, oh, like the doctors are greedy, we're going to cut, whatever. You can't have a practice. And if you can't have a practice, if you can't afford to have an independent practice, you're going to work for an insurance company, because who is like employing more physicians than anybody else these days are insurance companies. And you tell me how that should be legal, right? So if you're not even aware of the issues that are happening and you're not in the game, like we're all going to get eaten by it, right? And so no, I didn't say it was easy. It's not easy, right? It might be easy for me to be like, whatever, I'm take an extra 10 minutes with this patient. I mean, I do, because maybe I don't have to, my lifestyle isn't such that I have to, I'm not a slave. I'm not a slave to that, right? But we all have to start getting very thoughtful and strategic about our role in medicine. I think many of us have really just sort of abdicated our responsibility, as did the generations before us also did, which is why we're in this mess. But somewhere the buck has to stop somewhere. And now we are reaching these completely untenable situations, right? And so if we want to have like any say, it has to start now. Most amazing thing is that you will still be the face of that lawsuit when it comes down, when something bad happens. Unlike other industries where efficiency is the prize. Efficiency should not be the prize in medicine. right? And you're right. As long as it's your name and your license and your patient, that still has to be at the forefront. And the external pressures are hard. And of course, that's why people are leaving medicine, right? Because it sucks. It's hard. There's no easy answer. But I will say, if you're asking like specifically what will protect you against this, it is practicing good medicine the way you know you should be practicing it, taking the time to talk to your patient the way you know you should be doing it. Sure, you can be efficient around stuff that like is not those things. Um, but you know when you're not doing a good a job as you want to. And pay attention to that.
I mean, I think we've gotten to a point where it's your name on the chart, your liability, your responsibility. The weight is always on the physician, but you have like 10,000 administrators telling you what to do and how to practice medicine, right?
That's why you need this not to be one doctor's problem. This needs to be all the doctors' problems. Right. And so when you have doctors who are actually interfacing with the administration, they should have your back. And I know, you're giving me that look.
They
But if
often
you,
don't get that. They
I
often
know, I know,
don't.
I know, I know. But like if someone,
Like
I know, because they want to
crazy.
have that job and the hours reduction and whatever, like everybody, come on.
They want a
Come
few
on.
$1,000 stipend per month. That's the way, like $3,000,
I
$4,000,
know.
$5,000
This is like
stipend per month.
me
It's
begging them,
those are the
don't
sellouts.
sell out. Don't do it. For the love of everything that is holy, don't do it. Or if you're going to do it because you're going to surreptitiously and strategically save us. Like that's what we want. I don't.
That's very optimistic of you to think. I
I
mean,
know. I know. I know.
it's
I know.
but
I know.
but you know, obviously, I mean, we did a episode or a couple episodes on APPs, and they have collectively been able to bargain well for themselves.
I mean, honestly, the biggest dummies, right? And all because we're just like, oh, we have a calling, and oh, we're so good-hearted, and we don't think like that, and we're not business-minded. We just, we're, you know, come on. Like, we actually have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to act in ways that actually help our patients, like help us take good care of our patients and keep our practices afloat. Like we should be advocating for that. Somehow we adopted this mindset that that's dirty or shameful in some way. And nothing could be further from the truth.
I think it's early indoctrination, unfortunately. That's how they teach us in medical school, to put your
Mhm.
head down and work,
Yeah.
because individual thought is not awarded at all in this field. And I
Mm-mm.
think the biggest dummies, that actually kind of is the synopsis, the bullet point of this presentation. But by the time you realize you are the biggest dummy, it might be too late for you.
It's never too late, honestly. Like you can make a change, a pivot at any point, and you can get loud at any point. And honestly, the further along you are, the louder. Like what did I say? I'm in my zero F's era. I mean, like the louder you can get. Because, so I mean,
I
sure,
hear
if
you.
you realize early on and you start laying the groundwork for that, like you've gotta have a job. You've gotta, and then you start to figure out like how do I work within the system? How do I? And then I mean, this is why there's this huge movement to direct practice now. And like, before it was dirty because it was like, oh, concierge or but like honestly, there are all sorts of different models of doing it where you can make it affordable to the patient. It's hard for proceduralists. Yes, I get that. But then again, you know, doctor owned practices, like we need to revisit advocacy around that. We need to, there's a lot of stuff that we have to revisit legislatively. And part of that means that we've got to we're going to have to get lobbying that's effective. We have to get professional societies that are really listening to us and don't serve dual or triple masters. Um, sorry, I got off on a tangent, but I feel very strongly about these things because they're all interrelated. They're all interrelated. If you're asking like how do I reduce my risk of litigation? Like the answer to that is practice good medicine and talk to your patients and document well. And all of those things require a tiny bit of time. Yes, you should be efficient, but you should also be like attentive enough that you're doing a good job.
Definitely. So obviously, the current malpractice system in the United States is, it's crazy, right? Do you think this improves patient safety, or does it just create, fear and defensive medicine? But also, I can see it from the patient side.
Mhm.
If you have a patient that, for example, a husband loses his life in his 30s, and you have a wife and you have a kid who are, depending on this person, and there was negligence, then what's the solution to improve this kind of malpractice system?
There are a bunch of other models that we can look at that work better. I mean, I don't know if there's anything perfect out there. There are sort of no fault systems where people pay into, you pay into a fund And then an independent panel will determine whether or not and how much comes out of the fund. That's a possibility. There are things that we can do legislatively that curb some of the costs, these like runaway verdicts and these hundreds of $200 million, et cetera. We can curb the third party investing in there. Like there's a lot of things that taint this system um, that make it not about patient safety. It's just about money extraction from the system. I have a couple of podcasts about communication resolution programs. If anyone's interested, there's a documentary that I was a part of called A World of Hurt: How Medical Malpractice Fails Everyone. And it looks at the impact of litigation on plaintiffs, on the actual patients and their families, and on the doctors who are being sued. And then this third model of early disclosure and resolution that brings patients and their doctors together after adverse events to really like in a much more humane way that allow us to talk and to really be, to really talk about the things that happen instead of this like camping out on both sides and everybody's sticking, putting their heels down and saying we're not moving from our positions. Like it's just not as adversarial, right? I think most of us are yearning for a system that doesn't have to be this adversarial because we care about our patients, right? And when something does go wrong, like we want them to be okay. But we're using this as, an excuse for the fact that our healthcare system, our insurance, our systems of insurance, and that many people are underinsured, right? So how are they going to get the money after an injury? Who's going to take care of this kid? Because we don't have a system that's set up for that, and so we make it fall on the insurance side of things, like they should pay for care. I mean, yeah, we deserve way better systems than this. And we can look at, models in other countries. We can look at, systems where, loser pays systems, where, you pay at least the costs for the other side. There's so many things that we can, in my episode about advocacy, I have a wish list about like 20 things long about things that I think would make this better for doctors and for patients. But we better get moving.
So as we're getting close to closing out, do you mind just letting us know where people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website at doctorsandlitigation.com. I have a course called the LEAP course, which is litigation, education, and performance. You can find that in the website. It's called LEAP. I'm most active on LinkedIn. Anyone can find me there. My name or Doctors and Litigation. And that's on Instagram. And just started a YouTube channel. So hopefully you'll find me there at some point when I feel like making more videos. We were talking ahead of time that not that into video, but maybe I'll get there. And the podcast again is called Doctors and Litigation, the L Word.
We are a big fan. Thank you, Gita. And thanks for tuning in to Be Empowered, the podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Stay strong, stay empowered, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.